This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. It's been 16 months since a bullet came within inches of taking Donald Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania.
And if you want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
In that time, we've been told essentially nothing about the psychopathic shooter, Thomas Matthew Crooks. The official story that we've been told is that he acted alone, there's no clear motive, no clear ideology, and no digital footprint. None at all. Just weeks after the shooting that also took Couric life, then FBI Director Christopher Wray even tried to downplay the assassination attempt, suggesting that a bullet might not have hit Trump after all.
I think with respect to former President Trump, there's some question about whether or not it's a bullet or shrapnel that hit his ear.
Extraordinary. He claimed that the FBI found nothing in Crooks's online history that pointed to a motive or political ideology. A week later, his deputy, Paul Abate, told Congress there were social media posts that might have been connected to Crooks.
Something just very recently uncovered that I want to share is a social media account which is believed to be associated with the shooter in about the 2019-2020 timeframe. There were over 700 comments posted from this account. Some of these comments, if ultimately attributable to the shooter, appear to reflect anti-Semitic and anti-immigration themes, to espouse political violence, and are described as extreme in nature.
But is that all that they knew? Or was there much more that the FBI was trying to hide? Miranda Devine reports in the New York Post today, thanks to an enterprising source who uncovered Crooks's hidden digital footprint, we can see that Abate misled Congress by omission because he left out an entire section of Crooks's online interactions from January to August 2020 when he did an ideological backflip. He went from a rabidly pro-Trump to rabidly anti-Trump and then went dark, never seeming to post again. Now, Crooks reportedly left more than 700 public comments on YouTube. In July 2019, he was pro-Trump in his post, describing Donald Trump as a definition of patriotism. But by January 2020, he began criticising Donald Trump. And then throughout the summer of 2020, his online rhetoric became increasingly radical and violent. For example, in August 2020, he wrote, IMO, the only way to fight the government is with terrorism-style attacks, sneak a bomb into an essential building and set it off before anyone sees you. Track down any important people, politicians, military leaders, etc., and try to assassinate them. Now, remember, the FBI told Congress back in July last year they did not have any prior information about Crooks. Now, bombshell information has come to light about some of Thomas Crooks' interests. They include his interest in furries and exploring gender identity. He also described himself with the pronouns they, them. It's also been revealed that Crooks interacted with a person by the name of Willy Tepes, who is a member of the Norwegian neo-Nazi group, the Nordic Resistance Movement, which has since been designated a terrorist organisation. Now, Willy Tepes reportedly encouraged violence, using the phrase, political power comes from the barrel of a gun, which Thomas Crooks repeated. Shortly after Crooks's interaction with Tepes, Crooks disappeared offline. I mean, why are we learning this now? Why are we only learning about these developments and his interests now? The American people have been demanding information on this guy, and we've been getting crickets. Republican Tim Burchett has dropped a massive claim on Benny Johnson's show today. He believes that the shooter was programmed.
They programmed this kid, and Kristi Noem and Cash and Bongino and the rest are reporting the facts as they know them. The facts have been buried or burned, or whoever knew is either sitting on a beach somewhere and enjoying a fruity drink, or they're dead. I would suggest they're probably dead. And this is what happens. You claim it doesn't. They label me and you conspiracy theorists, but this is exactly what we see happen.
Now, he couldn't provide details or evidence for this claim, but this theory, this conspiracy theory, is circulating. And of course, conspiracy theories will be flourishing online when there is such limited information given to the public. And we know now the FBI left out key details about Crooks, his online history and his potential motive. The American people are so sick of being lied to and deserve answers. If you're a homeowner in America, you need to listen to this. The FBI has been warning about a type of real estate fraud on the rise called title theft, and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on a single document, use a fake notary stamp, and file it with the county. And just like that, on record, they own your home. Using your ownership, they can take out loans against your equity or even sell your property, and you won't even know about it until foreclosure or collection notices show up in the mail. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock so you can protect your equity and find out today if you're already a victim. Use my promo code POWER at hometitlelock.com and you'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title records, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud occurs, their US-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix it. Don't be a victim. Protect your equity today. That's hometitlelock.com, promo code POWER, or use the link below. Joining us now is Hilary Fordwich, President and founder of Strellmark. Hilary, it's great to see you again. Let's start with President Trump announcing that he supports House Republicans voting to release the Epstein files. He posted on Truth Social, as I said on Friday night aboard Air Force One, to the fake news media, House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files because we have nothing to hide. And it's time to move on from this Democrat hoax perpetrated by radical left lunatics in order to deflect from the great success of the Republican Party, including our recent victory on the Democrat shutdown. The Department of Justice has already turned over tens of thousands of pages to the public on Epstein and are looking at various Democrat operatives, including Bill Clinton and Larry Summers, etc., and their relationship to Epstein. And the House Oversight Committee can have whatever they are legally entitled to. I don't care. Hilary, I want to get your thoughts on this, but first, can we just have a quick look at what Chuck Schumer had to say when he was asked about why the files weren't released under Biden?
Senator, on that note, just I guess a question that's out there. Why wouldn't they have been released the last 4 years when President Biden was in office?
Well, that's the question every American is asking. Not every American, but so many Americans are asking. What the hell is he hiding? Why doesn't he want them released?
You know what, I agree with Chuck Schumer there. That is the question that plenty of Americans are asking. But Hilary, I want to get your thoughts on, of course, Chuck Schumer, but Donald Trump supporting House Republicans voting to release the Epstein files.
Well, pleasure to be back with you again, Gabriella, even though this is rather a ghastly, revolting subject. I will say a few things here. Number one, there were 3 judges that have actually blocked the release of any files over the recent years, and those were all, guess what, democratically elected judges. So that is a very important fact to remember. Another important fact to remember is that President Trump in 2004, I believe it was, had a falling out with Epstein then over a property dispute, actually, where they're both competing for a property. And then he didn't want him any longer at Mar-a-Lago because he was actually acting inappropriately with someone's teenage daughter. So after 2007, he had nothing more to do with him. He was disgusted by him. And I think that's something that's often lost. Not many people mention those dates and those years and those facts. Those are facts. Facts are stubborn things. Now, fast forward to this release. He promised the MAGA base this, Gabriella. Promises kept. You know, promises made, promises kept. I think it's very important to release the files. Actually, don't forget, Epstein was a registered Democrat. Most of his donors were Democrats, and the Democrats went down there on the Lolita Express and visited his island.
They did, and that point is often missed by the mainstream media. Let's talk about the BBC. Donald Trump has rejected the BBC's apology and has raised the stakes in his potential lawsuit, threatening to sue the BBC for $5 billion. This is, of course, after the BBC doctored his January 6th speech in a documentary deliberately misleading viewers. And of course, a similar edit was found on the network's Newsnight program in 2022. Now, it's interesting looking at Donald Trump's lawsuits. He's already gained $25 million from YouTube, from Meta, $10 million from X, $16 million from CBS and the ABC. But looking at the BBC, I mean, and the reaction to this, so many people are pleased that the BBC is being called out for its bias. Here is former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss.
There are lots of people in Britain who are cheering President Trump on and who want him to sue the BBC because they're a huge problem. They've lied, they've cheated, they've fiddled with footage, both in the case of President Trump, but also covering up what's happening in Britain, whether it's mass migration, whether it's our economic problems. They are always biased towards the left, and the British taxpayer has had to pay for all of this fake news. So there is a lot of excitement amongst Conservatives in Britain at the moment that President Trump is actually taking the BBC on.
Hilary, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, the BBC has certainly been exposed here.
Oh, yes. And I would say Liz Truss is right, and she's right, and she's right. What's very important, I think, for Australian viewers and global viewers around the world, in the US at least, the taxpayers fund PBS, which is the public broadcasting system. And exactly what Liz Truss just said there, the British taxpayer to watch television has to pay a television license. That's what funds the BBC. So if you're funded by the people, you have to be objective so that you represent all of the people. I don't know if you have the similar thing in Australia, but it's a very important point. I mean, networks can be biased. They can be left-wing if they want, and if they want to be right-wing. I think actually conservative is usually very sensible and more moderate than people give it credit for. But in this instance, I would say that, yeah, very importantly, you're paying to have something you don't necessarily want or believe in. And what's more egregious than anything is that the BBC's then, it's one thing to make, in quotes, a mistake, which they didn't do. It was deliberate. But then the apology, Gabriella, was an apology for an apology because they said it was misjudgment. It wasn't a misjudgment. It was a deliberate attempt. And that's what Liz Truss said. And I totally agree with her.
Now, the Oxford Union... Oh, yes, please continue.
Sorry, one last point I didn't make one last point, and that is Donald Trump didn't just beat, remember, the Democrats in the election, Gabriella. He beat all of social media. And this just proves he beat the actual media, too, in many nations because they were against him.
Yeah, clearly against him. Now, the Oxford Union has voted overwhelmingly in favour of declaring Israel a bigger threat than Iran. A debate took place at the Oxford Union Society on Thursday evening, discussing a motion which aimed to declare Israel more of a threat to regional stability. It's interesting, Hillel Neuer, the executive director of UN Watch, made the point that Israel does not arm terror proxies in 5 Arab countries. The regime of Iran does that. He also said that in his debate at the Oxford Union, he said that their proposition that Israel is a greater threat to regional stability than Iran struck me as deep satire. But then I recalled that 501 of their members voted to back the student chair who cheered the killing of Charlie Kirk. I mean, that's what I thought of as well, that you had the head of the Oxford Union, I mean, celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. But can I get your thoughts on the Oxford Union voting to overwhelmingly declare Israel a bigger threat than Iran, Hilary?
Well, maybe they didn't, Gabriella, hear about October 7th. I think that Israel obviously was attacked on October 7th. I actually was on a mission invited by the CEO of another network to go with their team and to go to Israel. And one thing that we learned there was Hamas, not only did they attack the Palestinians, obviously funded by and helped by the Iranians, but then that 5,000 actual civilians went in to have fun to murder more people. Now, they actually are exactly the same as the Iranians. I think the Iranians obviously were backing that. They allowed that to happen. They knew that that was happening. So they're culpable as well. And I think this is actually a very despicable vote. It just shows where they're from, and that actually I would say it's very sad for Oxford to see Oxford go this way.
Absolutely. Look, we've spoken about TDS quite a bit on this program, and it turns out it's a real thing. A psychotherapist has revealed that 75% of the patients he sees actually have this deep hatred for Donald Trump, and he's kind of gone into detail of what that looks like.
First of all, identify it for us. You're in a session and you pick up on what?
Well, Harris, it doesn't take long for me to pick up on this. People are obsessed with Trump. They're fixated. They're hyper-fixated on Trump. And they talk about some of the features of this disorder They can't sleep. They feel traumatized by Mr. Trump. They feel restless. I had one patient who said she couldn't enjoy a vacation because anytime she saw Trump in the news or on her device, she felt triggered. So this is a profound pathology, and I would even go so far as to call it the defining pathology of our time.
Now, Hillary was speaking about the BBC earlier. I think the mainstream media is to blame here. I mean, when you've got the mainstream media, leftist media, just putting out so much fake news against Donald Trump, plenty of woke so-called journalists compare him to Hitler, compare the Republican Party to Nazis. I mean, no wonder there are people in America that are getting this kind of extreme TDS.
Oh, I totally agree. And I have a prescription, actually, that will be the solution for this ghastly condition that they have. And that is, why don't they watch some more of Sky News Australia or the other networks I'm on, GB News and Newsmax in the US? They're watching networks like the BBC. And actually, it's a very serious issue because, again, the BBC used to be the bastion of serious, moderate, actually accurate news, and it is no longer. It is the Brit bashing corporation, and they actually have manipulated and misrepresented facts. And so I think that these poor, actually, I feel sorry for these people because obviously they're thinking that the networks are the same way that they were years ago. Watch Sky News Australia. They'll feel much better.
Great advice, very important advice, great prescription, I suppose. Look, I suspect plenty of these people have TDS. A new poll has revealed that 40% of young American women want to leave America permanently. This is according to a new Gallup poll. It found that 40% of women aged 15 to 44 voted in favour of leaving, and 19% of men within the same age bracket agreed with that. Look, I think the same thing. I think surely they've got Trump derangement syndrome and are trying to escape Trump's America.
Well, I've got another solution to that, Gabriella. They should just leave. They'll see what the rest of the world is like. And then they actually should look at statistics and they should see how many people try to come to America, both legally and illegally. If they don't appreciate the luxury that they have here, the safety that they have here, what nation the US is with all the opportunities, if they don't appreciate it, let them go and let other people that are hungry to work hard and have all the opportunities and appreciate America, they should be let in.
Well said. Hillary Fordwich, president and founder of Strelmark, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure, Gabriella, always.
It's time for Media Meltdowns, and it's been just a little over 2 months since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And all the leftist media wants to talk about are the views that Charlie held that they don't agree with. So even though Charlie was murdered by an alleged leftist lunatic, the big story for the media is how bad Charlie's rhetoric was for his conservative and Christian values. Here's Katie Couric trying her hardest to get Democrat John Fetterman to condemn Charlie on her podcast Next Question.
Did you have any issues now in hindsight over some of the things that Charlie Kirk said and some of the rhetoric he used during his life?
I didn't agree with much of it. I didn't closely follow his specific kinds of views, but I did.
I'm sure you learned about them after his death.
Keeps going.
No, I haven't done a deep dive on it. You know, we've all seen that terrible video. Perhaps if you've seen the actual video, I have. And it's like appalling. And that's part of the political violence.
But Katie Couric doesn't stop there. She keeps pushing, suggesting that Charlie Kirk didn't deserve the outpouring of love and respect from leaders.
Do you think that flags should have been flown at half-staff? Do you think his body should have been flown on Air Force Two? Do you think he should have posthumously be given the Presidential Medal of Freedom? I think some people felt that that was perhaps over the top in terms of mourning someone like Charlie Kirk. How did you feel about that?
I'd say that was his choice and his prerogative, and that was really entirely up to him.
Look, as we keep seeing, there are leftist freaks that are still celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder, and for Katie Couric, all she's concerned about is Charlie's rhetoric, not the psycho-leftists encouraging his murder.
I think some people might say Charlie Kirk's rhetoric was extreme. You know, I think that's the conversation that happened people condemned political violence, but they also felt a great deal of discomfort with his language, suggesting that these kinds of words lead to violence. I don't know. I'm just kind of sharing my observations as I saw the conversations unfold.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we agree that we probably didn't agree with much of what he said. And I think I'm sure we both agree that you shouldn't shoot people, you know, and you shouldn't execute them in public.
Joining us now is newsroom editor at Unheard, James Billow. James, thank you for joining us. I mean, what do you make of Katie Couric there? It seems like she's kind of dancing around the suggestion of blaming Charlie Kirk for his own murder.
Well, it was just a strange interview technique from the get-go. I think Fetterman made his point pretty clearly, pretty early on in that first answer, and yet she kept trying to flog the same issue over and over again. And it reminds me of that Sydney Sweeney interview with the that millennial interviewer saying, like, do you wish to condemn white supremacy? I'm going to give you the space, the opportunity here. And it's all this sort of millennial BLM rhetoric that we've become so accustomed to and so jaded by. And I commend Fetterman for not taking the bait, for standing firm, and just letting Couric hang herself by her own rope there.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about the Democrats and the shutdown. A CBS News poll found that 60% of Americans disapprove of how Democrats handled the government shutdown. It's also been revealed by CNN that Chuck Schumer was behind closed doors begging to keep the government shutdown going until Thanksgiving. And Democrats haven't ruled out another one.
If Democrats cannot get an agreement on Obamacare subsidies, do you rule out shutting down the government again in January?
Don't ask me to assume failure on the effort that we're undertaking. I think we can, we ought to plan for success and then adjust if we don't get it, as you point out.
Not ruling it out there. And then, of course, there are chuckles from the journalists, yet this caused so much pain to Americans.
Right. 43 days, I think it was. And it was a painstaking process. I was flying across the country during this shutdown when flight air traffic controllers hadn't been paid for nearly 2 months. A lot of these people live from paycheck to paycheck. They can't afford to live 2 months without pay. So to see the way in which this game has just turned into something like political football, it's just been pretty appalling. And as for Chuck Schumer, his leadership has been nothing short of disgraceful. He is a complete joke now. No Democrat respects him. That's why 8 peeled away and ended up striking a deal in the first place. And he has lost all authority and all credibility. And it is only a matter of time before he's kicked out. And he should just do the honorable thing at this point and step aside.
It's been revealed that AOC, not Gavin Newsom, had the most effective ad campaign in California's recent Proposition 50 campaign, according to private research by Future Forward. Now, this is, of course, interesting because AOC is no doubt eyeing off a run for either President of the United States or the US Senate. Now, Bill Maher had this to say on AOC.
If she had some deprogramming, she could be such a fantastic candidate.
What do you mean deprogramming?
Well, she just doesn't, she's never going to resonate with people outside of the bubble that she lives in the very, very far left.
Well.
And that, I mean, the New York Times, of all people, the people I've been, like, squabbling with for the last 7, 8, 10 years, whatever, when I was all about, you know, Democrats have gone too far left, they just put out a huge editorial basically saying exactly what I've been saying.
What, that she's too far left?
Yes, and that the only way the Democrats will ever win again, not that the Republicans are probably going to give it back, is to be more moderate.
James, too far left? I mean, that's breaking news.
I know. And look, AOC, she is actually playing a smart game. She's trying to build bridges with the moderates and the centrist wing of the party. Unfortunately, the thing she said in the past has been essentially treating these people like stormtroopers from Germany. And so you can't be surprised if they're not willing to extend an olive branch back. Now, AOC comes from a district that is something like plus 29 Democrat. She has absolutely zero appeal with moderates, independents, swing voters. And someone like Trump or a GOP candidate will be licking their lips at the prospect of an AOC candidacy for presidency. And I wouldn't be surprised if she does run, and they'll be able to paint her as the face of this extremist party and they'll run away with it in the election. So I would not be surprised if this happens. I think it's even more likely than we think.
I agree. I think we've got to watch this one very closely. Now, Jack Schlossberg says that Donald Trump's obsession, with his family explains why the president put his cousin, RFK Jr, in cabinet. He was speaking on the weekend on MS Now, and he compared RFK Jr to a rabid animal Trump has caged, saying that the president has his cousins barking, spreading lies and misinformation. He sounds absolutely charming. Listen to this.
And President Trump, and it's not just my family's legacy, it's generations of Americans and New Yorkers who fought and sacrificed to build this country. And he is dismantling that legacy. He's so obsessed with the Kennedys and the Kennedy name and the Kennedy brand that he caged one and put it in his cabinet, a rabid dog in his cabinet, put a collar on my cousin RFK Jr. and has him there barking, spreading lies and spreading misinformation.
Yeah, it's funny when they're projecting, when I think someone has a little bit of TD-esque. James, can I get your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think he got a little bit lost in his own metaphor there. I don't know how he struggled to land the plane, but either way, it's a strange paradox that Schlossberg's going for here, because he's clearly trying to lean into the Kennedy name, and yet at the same time he's trying to present himself as this unique figure. I don't believe that any family or any political dynasty should be getting a leg up in American politics. This is an egalitarian country. It runs against the ideals and founding principles of one of the greatest countries on the earth. And someone like Jack Schlossberg, who thinks they can just slot into a New York political seat, is, I think, an insult to the system, and I hope voters will see through it.
Look, coming up this week, President Trump's going to be hosting Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the White House. This is for high-level talks aimed at strengthening economic and defence ties. What more can we expect from this?
Well, I think, first of all, it's actually just a great thing that this meeting's even happening. Let's not forget with the Biden years that he chose to snub him after the Khashoggi murder, and that resulted in this tripartite effort between China, Iran, and then Russia later on, where you had this much more enmeshing of relations that even resulted in a rapprochement with Iran. So I think Trump is doing exactly the right thing by actually bringing these people to the table and trying to restart relations. I think it's a good thing that he's selling F-35 jets. It may not be in Israel's interest, but America has to act in its own interests. I think that's exactly what Donald Trump is doing.
Look, finally, let's just talk about the UK. We've spoken about it plenty of times before, but I mean, just this year, almost 40,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small inflatable boats. Keir Starmer is on 17% looking at his polling numbers, and now the UK has announced an overhaul of its immigration system to reduce the amount of asylum seekers. Under this new policy, the deportation of illegal migrants will be fast-tracked and refugee status will become temporary. Let's just take a listen to UK Home Secretary Sabana Mahmood.
Unfortunately, I am the one that is regularly called a and told to go back home. It is I who knows through my personal experience and that of my constituents just how divisive the issue of asylum has become in our country. I wish it were possible to say that there isn't a problem here, that there's nothing to see, and that it is all, in fact, just extremist right-wing talking points. But this system is broken.
James, can I get your thoughts on this, if this is really going to work? You know, nothing else that Keir Starmer's been able to do has been able to work so far. It's just been getting worse.
Well, it is refreshing to hear a Labour minister talk like that after so many years of denying there was even a problem. But Labour, quite frankly, is dancing to Farage's tune right now. And there's a reason that he's on track to become Britain's next Prime Minister, unless there's a radical change in policy. This new visa restriction program, I mean, it pales in comparison to what really needs to happen. I think it restricts something like 3 countries, or is denying visas to something like 3 countries. You need something much more vast than that. And like I said, they are just in the shadow of reform at the moment. I would love to see the UK turn into a system like Australia's that has some kind of point system. I know you guys have some problems of your own, but whatever we have here, it's far too permissive, and it's setting a really bad example to the rest of Europe as well. So I hope in the best of UK's interest that they can do something about this. But again, who knows with this Labour government.
James Billow, newsroom editor at Unheard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Joining us now is News Corp journalist Angela Mollard. Angela, great to see you.
Great to see you too, Gabriella.
Let's talk about former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as he's now called. He's been seen in public. This is for the first time since he was stripped of his titles. And of course, the former Duke of York was photographed riding in the grounds of Windsor Castle with a female companion, but this is the first public sighting of him in almost 7 weeks.
That's right. He's kept very quiet over this tumultuous period. Clearly, and he used to be someone who went out on his horse every day and went horse riding, so clearly that's had a massive impact. He's wanted to stay away from prying eyes. Yes, it is significant. It's also significant that it's come out at the same time, that he's stepped out at the same time, that really, for the first time, we have seen proof that he was lying about that photo with Virginia Giuffre, because, of course, the US has released documents now showing Jeffrey Epstein sending an email to a journalist saying, yes, that picture of Andrew was with her, as pictures were often taken with members of my employees. Now, how do you reconcile that email with Andrew always denying that he'd ever met her? We now know that that is just obfuscation. He absolutely met her. What happened between them, we'll probably never exactly know, but of course we've got her story.
We do, and you're right, he just cannot escape these connections with Jeffrey Epstein, and we've heard him, I suppose, lie before, and now that Congress has released all those 20,000 files related to Epstein, which included that email from Jeffrey Epstein about Andrew confirming that he was photographed with Virginia Giuffre, something that he always denied. Now, Princess Beatrice, she's been speaking out about the challenges of premature birth, as she calls for increased research. Now, the princess's daughter, Athena, was born several weeks premature on January 22, and Princess Beatrice said that premature birth can be incredibly lonely. Can you talk to us a bit more about what she had to say?
That's right. This was her second daughter. She came early. As you said, she was born on January 22nd. And we know that Beatrice, there was some fear that she would go into premature labour, because that Christmas she was intending to go to Italy, where her husband's family is from. At the last minute, they decided not to. They went and spent it with the royal family on the Sandringham estate. But why this is interesting is it shows that Beatrice and Eugenie are still being welcomed into these types of roles, these new spokespeople roles. She was also recently reappointed in a role for Outward Bound. Now, these young women have a great presence in royal life. If they can stick to doing these sorts of things, to speaking about premature birth, or in Eugenie's case, about scoliosis and the impacts of that, that's where they can, as non-working royals, but working alongside charities, really make a difference. Now, Beatrice is the most shy of the two sisters, so for her to take on these roles and to speak very personally, she never shows pictures of her children or anything like that, speaks to her really wanting to maintain that royal, she only gets these roles because she is royal, is to be doing good out there. And they will be as nervous as all get out, those two women, about the roles they now have, speaking very tentatively, and they have to be aligned with charities. We saw that, the criticism of them with the Saudi princes, that sort of thing. It has to make sure it's very on message and very on line with charity work.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Princess Catherine has spoken out about letting go, or learning to let go, I should say, of what's no longer needed and to embrace change. This is in a new personal video message, which was released via Kensington Palace. As part of her Mother Nature series, Kate encouraged people to embrace the beauty found in change.
As the days grow shorter and the shadows grow longer, the energy of summer withdraws into autumn. This is the season for reflection and refinement. Trees shed their canopies in preparation for winter, just as we too learn to let go of what is no longer needed. Through greater awareness of our inner and outer worlds, we can find clarity and purpose in what matters most. Encouraging us to simply pay attention and listen. With the turning of the seasons, Mother Nature teaches us there's beauty to be found in change, impermanence, and in letting go.
Now, it's interesting timing because, of course, Catherine and Prince William are in the midst of major changes themselves, having moved from Adelaide Cottage to their new forever home.
I think Kate is really entering her wisdom era. This is the queen that we are going to see. She's in her 40s now. She's experienced a lot of life. You know, you cannot live within that family and not have to be very onto it in terms of how things are handled. You know, there is that role is a constant solution-based job, frankly. What I love about the lyricism in these videos is that they are so on brand with her. She has worked in early childhood. She has seen nature and it has become a massive salve for her. It's almost on the sort of meditation, mindfulness, you know, in that bracket. But I feel like she's really speaking to a new generation of women and men coming through, and she really wants the royal family to be relatable. Now, getting out into nature, children being in nature. Her son George, of course, is 12. William's talked about the fact he wants a mobile phone. They're putting the kibosh on that for the moment. They, of course, are moving house into this forever home because George next year will start high school, and that will be the moment. You know, what do you do with a 13-year-old son in a media environment? She is driving a message of really solid parenting through her early childhood education, but also being in nature, and that's stilling and calming her. And, you know, she speaks from tremendous experience now. I cannot wait to see what the next 40, 50 years are going to look like for the Princess of Wales.
No, we're very lucky to have Princess Catherine indeed. Now, Harry and William, there's been a bit of speculation. Will they patch things up? Will they not? Of course, after years of tension between the royal brothers, a rare public remark from Prince William has sparked fresh signs that he might finally be open to a truce with Harry, but under strict conditions. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
That's right. He gave an interview to a journalist in the environmental sphere, and he was talking about how things were going to be different going forward. And he said, you know, we don't want to go back to the way things worked when Harry and I were younger. Now, the fact he name-checked Harry in that interview is massive. We cannot underestimate that William, who has basically operated from a position of extreme loathing towards his brother since he released Spare, where, of course, there was the anecdote about them having this private scuffle and the dog bowl being broken and all that sort of detail that William would have hated. To have mentioned Harry's name and to not only mention his name, but to suggest that the way things were done in the past was hard for him. I don't know what he's referring to. It could be things like having to walk behind their mother's coffin when Harry was only 12. I wonder to what extent William, having a son the same age as Harry is now, it was 12 when he lost his mother, whether that has led William to a place of greater reconciliation. And we know that Kate and the King are pushing for William, who is the hard guy, to actually soften towards his brother. We know the King has met with Harry. I think there's every chance that this signals a softening in William.
Wow, that's significant.
Which will be
indeed.
huge.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the photo we want,
right
isn't
now,
it?
But yes, it would be a huge moment indeed. Now, there's a bit of talk that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are planning a trip to Australia. These are the reports according to a comment they made in a leaked letter to a celebrity friend. Of course, that must be a Meghan Markle thing indeed. What can you tell us about this?
That's right. They met with this astrologer in New York called Angela Pearl. They're apparently fans of each other. There's a photo up on the Instagram page of Angela Pearl, and she's also received a letter from them subsequent to that meeting in October where they've said she's a Ukrainian woman but now lives in Australia, saying, you know, best wishes to your family in Ukraine, and, you know, we hope to visit you in Australia soon. Huge news, of course, because they spent their time, you know, Meghan announced her pregnancy in Australia, and we would love them to come down here, wouldn't we? It would just be such an interesting occasion. But, of course, remember when Meghan did come to Australia, that was the moment she went, what, this is royal work? You know, lots of biographies and things have looked at the fact that she questioned whether she should have been paid for the work that she was doing. She also saw a lot of it is pointless, according to Tina Brown, the biographer. So I think, I mean, while we'd love to see them down here, it'd be great for stories and for our sort of work. You know, maybe they want to bring the kids and introduce them to some koalas and things like that. They're still very, you know, Harry particularly is very, very fond of Australia, having spent time here. So it's very possible.
Okay, we'll watch this space indeed. Now, finally, let's just talk about Disney, away from the royal news to some entertainment news. It seems that Disney is finally ditching DEI. Disney didn't mention diversity in its annual report for the first time since 2019. I mean, Angela, is Disney finally waking up, finally getting the message. You go woke, go broke.
Well, Disney has been that woke company, hasn't it? And if you think about Snow White and the trouncing that got by the critics, I mean, I just will never forget the Times wrote that Disney had trashed its crown jewel, that it was a sanctimonious remake. There's some criticism at the moment around a remake of Moana, which is just seeping through today. It's a CGI enhanced remake, and everybody loved that original Moana from 10 years ago. It was just, you know, perfect Disney in its space. But interesting that they're obviously looking at the optics on the company and also the way the company works, you know, and probably also, you know, Trump has said he doesn't want DEI within companies. Look, the fact there's no mentions at all, does this signal a complete reversal, or are they just trying to actually you know, subtly get a better public image because they need to do something. It is, you know, this is a major brand that people think, you know, has lost the plot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Plenty of other companies are rolling back DEI policies, you know, after it's been proven that it doesn't really work. But Disney in particular has just been so woke, especially with that Snow White remake. My goodness. Angela Mollard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.